Muy bien, buenas tardes a todos. Soy Jorge Las Heras, presidente del Círculo Empresarial Japón-España, y les doy a todos la bienvenida a esta cuarta sesión de nuestros coloquios online. Today, the title of the webinar will be Kaizen after the coronavirus. Kaizen refers to two kanji Japanese characters, which means change for the better. Kaizen is defined as a continuous effort by each and every employee to ensure improvement of all processes and systems of a particular organization. Kaizen has been one of the main drivers for Japanese companies delivering top quality products and services, and therefore becoming leaders in many economic sectors. Kaizen has been, and still it is, a good tool for continuous improvement and good management. Looking at the potential effects of the present crisis on the economy, the companies, and management, the question is, after COVID-19, Kaizen concept and its application to organizations will change. To answer this question, we come today with Mr. Kieron Zap. Kieron is a Dutch professional with more than 20 years experience in deploying continuous improvement programs. He's educated in business information technology and statistics at the Hague University of Applied Science in Holland, and he's also officially certified as Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt and by the Lean Six Sigma company. Currently, he is manager of business improvement and program management Europe of Usain Logistics, responsible for the implementation of the Kaizen program in Europe and for leading the team dedicated to shaping the future of Usain Logistics. During this session, Kieron will be at the Usain Logistics regional headquarters in Hoofddorp, the Netherlands. So, Kieron, welcome, and thank you very much for being today here with us. And with more.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you for the very nice introduction. Hello, welcome everyone to today's webinar, Kaizen in a post-COVID-19 world. In a few seconds, I will share my screen with you, so you can actually have a look at the things we prepared. But before we start, I have a tiny piece of housekeeping to do with you, which I want to discuss with you. During this webinar, or after the webinar, we will host a live Q&A. So if you have any questions during or after the webinar, you can use the Q&A feature of Zoom. You will find it at the bottom of your screen. If you type in your question, I will be able to see your question and to answer it. If you do not want to share your question during this session, but you still want to get in touch with me, please go to kaizenwebinars.com, leave your details, and I will reach out to you personally. All right, I will share my screen. I think in the meantime, maybe, Jorge, you can launch the survey, because we prepared a one-question survey, which will give me a bit more insight in your knowledge of Kaizen. It's only one question. If you fill it in, it would help me to tailor this presentation to your needs. I'll give you a few seconds to answer the question.
Oriol, can you launch the survey?
Yes, I've already do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, I hope everyone is voting. Would help me actually with this presentation. Give you a few seconds more, and I will launch my screen.
Okay, the survey is finished. Everybody have answered, and I'm sharing the results.
So I see most of you have some experience with Kaizen, with continuous improvement, so that's very good. Then don't need to go into too many details on some of the slides, so I hope that prevents some of your questions. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to put them in the Q&A. I'm more than happy to answer them. Kaizen after the shock, how to thrive in a post-COVID-19 world. Today I want to discuss the impact of COVID-19 on a bigger scale, on a bigger level. I do not want to discuss it on the level of how should we improve our cleaning techniques, or how do we set up our shifts in order to prevent infections of our staff. Those are important topics, but I'm pretty sure you have specialists in your company who are more than capable of taking care of that. What I want to discuss with you is the impact of the coronavirus, COVID-19, on your supply chain. I only have 4 items we're going to discuss. The intro, which is actually quite short, only 3 slides. And after that, we will have a look at the impact of COVID-19 on supply chains, but also how Kaizen actually can help you to thrive in that world. How can Kaizen contribute to a more stable, more robust supply chain? After that, the Q&A. As an introduction, who are we? We are Houston Logistics. We are a team of 25,000 professionals. And we only have one mission, one aim, and that's to be your preferred supply chain company. We're aiming for what we call a seamlessly connected supply chain. We like to create better connections with you, with your customers and your suppliers. We would like to be your linking pin in the supply chain. And actually, we do that. We have a presence in 45 countries. We operate from almost 350 cities and 600 locations worldwide. We are specialized within 6 industry verticals: the automotive, healthcare, retail, aerospace, technology, and food. Automotive originated from. The history goes back to Toyota, who started Toyota production system and the Kaizen methodology. So for us that one is very important. We have several capabilities. We do ocean freight, we do air freight, contract logistics, supply chain logistics, land transport. We cover all modalities for you, and we can cover your whole supply chain. So that's the introduction. As promised, really short. Let's do a bit more deep dive in the topic of today: how to thrive in a post-COVID-19 world. On the front page already showed this statement: 75% of companies report the coronavirus, COVID-19, has disrupted their supply chains. And disruptions can come in many different ways. And just to give you a few examples: maybe a decrease in production capacity, maybe resource constraints, lead times that are increasing, maybe even your demand is increasing. If you work from an e-commerce vertical, or maybe in healthcare, the increased demand for your products might even have caused disruptions. So there are a lot of different ways disruptions impact your supply chain. To overcome these disruptions, and not only to overcome, but also to be prepared for them in the future, because COVID-19 is not the only disruption we will see. There will be many other type of disruptions coming our way. It could be a virus, it could be an earthquake, it could be a flood, or even on a micro level, it could be workers going into a strike. It could be one of your main suppliers going bankrupt. It is all possible. So there are a lot of disruptions, and how are we going to tackle those? The main objective for companies, we think, should be understanding the impact of different type of disruptions on your supply chain, and to prepare for those to happen. Because if they happen, and your process was well designed, you will be able to overcome the disruption, or even benefit from the disruption. But to be able to do so, your process, your supply chain needs to be adaptive, flexible, or agile. If you succeed, you will have an advantage against your competitors if they don't succeed. So that's the game we're in. If you want to become, or if you want to make your supply chain adaptive, flexible, then you need to take certain steps. And we think that we have a strategy that fits that result. First, we think you need to know what is the exposure to disruptions. What crises can come on our way? It depends on your supply chain. If you have a supply chain coming from China to Europe, maybe you will have other disruptions, other crises than when it goes from Europe to Americas. So you need to know, what is my supply chain? How does it run from the beginning to the end? And what type of disruptions can we encounter? Then we need to know, if a disruption happens, what should we do? What can we do? How can our process respond to it? How did we design the process? Do we have a robust infrastructure? Our network, our systems, our processes, our people, are they capable of dealing with a disruption? And do we have a backup or an alternative way? So we start with the exposure, then we decide how robust is our design, and then we make sure we are adaptive, that if something happens, we know what to do to keep our processes running, to keep serving our customers in the future. If you summarize it, it is about identifying the risks, identifying the improvements, and in the end, implementing the solutions. If I would put it in a graph, it would look like this. On the horizontal bar, we have the time. On the vertical axis, we have the performance. What if a crisis happens? Let's say the crisis begins here. And actually your process condition, the quality of your process, the quality of your supply chain will start to decrease. And at the same time, your risks and costs will start to increase. And if you don't take action, you will become at a point of failure. And if you even wait until then, you come at a point we call beyond repair. This is how it works. Something happens, if we don't take any actions, we will see a failure. We will be companies take are in this area. We wait for the failure, then we try to repair it. We try to fix the problems we encounter. But I think if you look at the current situation, then COVID-19 crisis, it actually showed us that we should not wait for disruptions to happen. We should be prepared for it. We should not try to fix the problem when it's there. We should try to prevent it from happening. So if you look at the time bar and you go from right to left, currently many companies are reactive and corrective. Something happens, we fix it. But you actually need to move to the left. If we can prevent disruptions, alright, COVID-19, quite difficult to prevent, but maybe other disruptions we can. If you try to prevent them, or have a proactive strategy against them, or even predictive, the world is full of data from which we can learn, then we can prevent issues from happening, or we can respond to it when the problem is not that big yet. It will save us a lot of money, costs, but also a lot of problems. It makes us way more flexible than if you wait until everything is quite close to failure. So our strategy is not to wait for failure, but that we move from a reactive approach to a preventive approach to Kaizen. And I know what you're thinking. Alright, I think I know what you're thinking. And yes, I can write a book about it, but I will not do it today. But I will answer the question, what has this to do with Kaizen? Because Kaizen for us is a way to improve. If you look back into the history, and Jorge already explained, it's a Japanese way of making improvements. It's based on a mindset or strategy. A mindset that we say, alright, we use all the employees we have. We use what we call our brain power. We connect the brain power to come to improvements. Incremental improvements. We take small steps, we stabilize, we take another small step, we stabilize, etc., etc. Small incremental improvements, because they have low risks if you take smaller steps, but in the end they will lead to a huge improvement. So Kaizen, the mindset of changing things for the better, can be applied to anything. Activities, processes, products, services. Could be manufacturing and logistics, but it could be also in your office or your administrations. It is not linked to manufacturing side or logistics side. It can be applied anywhere in your supply chain, but also outside of your supply chain. If we summarize Kaizen in just one sentence, it is about improving areas in your company by trying to reduce waste. And waste comes in many different ways. It could be that you have too high inventory. It could be too many defects, over-processing. There are several types of waste we can identify and we can remove from your process. Kaizen is famous for several standardized tools being used by companies across the globe. Toyota started with the Toyota production system, Toyota management system, and started to use certain tools which have become the basics of Kaizen. 5S. Probably you know about 5S. It's about cleaning, making sure you remove all the items you don't need, putting everything in a fixed location, and maintaining that. 5S. PDCA cycle is about plan, do, check, act. It's a certain approach how you implement and improve items. Standardized work, having all your SOPs in place, make sure you review them at least yearly and update them according to the new standards. Control charts, making sure you can see your progress and results. All these standard tools, they lead to small incremental improvements, small steps to get to a higher level. But these tools are not only incremental, they're also reactive and corrective. Kaizen, from the basics, is a reactive approach. We wait for an employee to have a brilliant idea, then we make the improvement. That means we already are executing the process, and we learn on the fact how we execute the process. Something wrong. And then we do a root cause analysis, a 5 times why analysis, and we improve the process. So Kaizen, from its basics, is reactive or even corrective. But in a time like this, with rapid and drastically changing customer demand, where there's a new normal, and we all need to live according to a new normal, and where we all need to be prepared for new disruptions. COVID-20, who knows? Maybe an earthquake, maybe a flood, but we will know there will be new disruptions in our supply chain. We need to be prepared for it. So my question is aiming for incremental improvements the right way forward? Taking small steps to improvement. Is that good enough? Is incremental improvements fast enough? Or do we need radical improvement? Innovations, new things, new technology to help improve our supply chains, to make our supply chains robust, flexible, adaptive. So we are prepared for new disruptions, in whatever way they come. But then, if you want to be innovative, it also means you need to go from a reactive approach to a preventive approach. You need to look ahead instead of looking back to the past. And that's where Kaizen comes in for us. If you look at the use and logistics approach to Kaizen, and it looks a bit like this, then we have the basics, what we call use and action system. The basics are important. You need to be able to respond to things that happen. You will never be able to predict or prevent everything. So your basics, it's still the core, it's the most important item. But we also added Kaizen 2.0 and 4.0 to our approach. Kaizen 2.0 is what we call a process analysis, end-to-end processes. We don't look at the single activities inside a process. Now we look at all the activities in the process, all the steps we take to come to a certain result. And then we look at all those steps, how they are connected to each other. Because if we can connect the dots, we can create a robust and efficient process. Kaizen 4.0 goes one step further. Because if you understand your process and you know all the steps in the process and how they are connected, then you can also start measuring those processes. You will get data, and data can tell us what will happen in the future, or what is highly likely to happen in the future. It also tells us how we performed in the past, from which we can learn. So it will give us a lot of insight in how our supply chain is developing or will develop in the future. So I put the differences on the slide. I already explained to you. I don't want to go in too much text on slides. That's not my style, so I will skip these. And I will give you this picture. So we have the Kaizen basics. We have the process-driven approach. And we have the data-driven approach. But we think it's not enough. Because if we learn from our processes and we learn from the data, we need to be able to design the best process. The process that is robust, that is adaptive. And we added something to our Kaizen approach. We call it CEJE, which means design or something new, translated from Japanese. And it is about how to deploy your strategy. If you know what processes you have and which ones are important, how are you going to design them so they actually contribute to your strategy, but still are agile or adaptive, that if something happens, they can be changed easily. For the next couple of slides, and I will go a bit more into detail, I'm trying to make it a bit more practical for you. I will discuss what we call process improvement, process risk assessment, and robust process design. And I'm going to combine them. And I will show you that if you take the power of Kaizen, and the power of Kaizen is about simplicity, taking some simple tools to solve complex problems. If you combine these tools, you will have a very efficient approach to get to a robust and adaptive process. You remember this just before. This is where it fits in, if you look at our approach. So we're trying to cover this part. We will not forget about the total failure part on the right, because we know the basics are important and we need to control the basics. But if you want to be prepared for the future, we need to look into the left side of this picture. If you look at our proactive approach and you look at process analysis, process improvement or risk management and process design, we use two very simple tools. First one is a SIPOC diagram, and anyone who has some knowledge of Kaizen or lean management probably knows the SIPOC. It's a very simple tool to describe high level how your process flows. It describes the steps you take on high level, it describes the actors that are involved and the inputs and outputs. The second tool, and this is a tool personally I like the most because it's very, very helpful to understand your processes, is what we call a makigami. And a makigami is a Japanese tool, and if you translate it, it means a roll of paper. And that's actually what you need. If you look at the picture on the left, you can see a makigami. It is about a piece of paper and some sticky notes. We use those two tools and we combine them with the people, the actors that actually work in the process. Because if you go to the operational level of an organization, that's where the knowledge is. That's where the people are who know the process, who knows the problems, and actually can also help you identify future problems, the risks. Those two tools, how simple they are, they can be applied on your whole supply chain. They can be used to cover your end-to-end process, which might start at your supplier and ends at your end customer. And it covers all the steps in between. If that scope is too big, it can be done on a part of your process, a part of your supply chain, or even on individual processes, like in a warehouse. You can cover only the picking or the packing process with a Makigami approach. But if you want to cover all the processes that run through your supply chain, we can do it as well. And not only your physical operations like manufacturing, operations, warehousing, but the approach actually covers the office and the admin processes as well. And in fact, if you look at the current trends, your office processes and your administrative processes are getting more and more important, because a lot of processes are supported by IT systems and are driven by the information that runs through them. So the office and the admin process is becoming more and more important for Kaizen. We as a logistics service provider, for us this is very important, because we need to be able to connect the dots in your supply chain. That's our job. Our job is to make sure that your supply chain runs efficient. So we need to have that bigger view. We can't only focus on what happens in one warehouse, because that's not enough. We need to connect the dots between the warehouses, the transportation modes, up until to your customer. And if we understand the full flow, we can make improvements. First step in the approach, process analysis or process improvement. I'll show you how we use the SIPOC, and I will show you how we use the Makigami. If you look at process analysis, it starts with identifying the inputs and outputs, procedures, SOPs, the data, the systems, the people that work in the process. And the SIPOC is a very easy tool to identify this information. And this is important because if you look at the procedures, the process, that will be the scope of your project. If you look at the actors, those are the people who work in the process, but those are also the people you should invite for your project, because they bring the knowledge, and that's why we need them. So if you look into a SIPOC, and I will give you a short explanation how a SIPOC works, then the SIPOC stands for suppliers, input, process, output, and the customer. So we're going to record high level what these items, these elements are. So we were going to record who is the customer of a process, who receives something out of a process. Can be something physical, like a product, a delivery. Can be something as a service, information you receive at the end. These are all products and services, and a customer receives them. Something that the customer receives at the end of a process. The process itself, well, those are 6, 7 high-level steps from the beginning to the end of the process. Like, we receive an order, we plan the order, we pick the order, we pack the order, and we ship the order. Typical warehouse process, 6, 7 steps. We capture the inputs, everything that goes into the process, and then it's being transformed in the process to an output. And we look at the suppliers, who provides something to the process. And the external suppliers, those are quite easy. They provide raw materials or components, that's easy. But the most important suppliers of your processes are your employees. Your employees provide labor but also knowledge to your process in order to transform the input to an output and in order to make your customer happy. So we capture these elements, and I prepared an example for you, more or less. Let's say we captured those elements. So we captured 3 customers on the right. We captured some outputs and some inputs. This is very basic. There's still nothing improved. We didn't find any opportunities for improvement yet. But we're going to use this information to kickstart our Makigami. And the Makigami is the tool where we can find the improvements. So have a look. What we do. We take all the actors, the suppliers and the customers, and we put them on the left side. We take the inputs and the outputs and we put them at the bottom of the Makigami. The 6, 7 or 5 steps of the process, we put them at the top, because that's your scope. And when we start mapping the process in detail, we want to be sure we stay within the scope. Scope creep, when we move away from the initial scope, is your biggest risk to any projects. So this will help us to stick with the scope we set at the start. When we have this set up, we use the knowledge of the actors, the customers and the suppliers, to map every detailed step in the process. The devil is in the detail. So we map every detailed process. That's the first round. In the second round, we're going to look for issues. We're going to look for wastes. If you look at the Kaizen basics, the basic Kaizen tools, then we're going to look for Muda, Mura, Muri, which stands for the wastes, the overburdening of staff, and the variation. So we're going to look for things we should improve. We're going to look for opportunities. And we write them down, and we stick them to the process step where the problem occurs, where we should make the improvement. And this approach, although the Makigami is not often used by other companies, but it is the core of ours, and it has helped us so much with so many projects. Most projects stop at this point because they identified some improvements and they're going to make improvements, and that satisfies a lot of companies. But not us, because this is not enough. This is reactive. We look at how we execute the process in detail and we try to make some improvements. It's reactive. It's not enough. So for us, there's the second step, and that's the process risk management. We're going to look at the same process, but then from a risk management point of view. So we're going to identify any possible risks, and we're going to identify how we can mitigate those risks in the future. Why? Well, we need to mitigate because we need to reduce the impact or the probability of those events. So we're going to identify the risks, we're going to analyze them, similar to root cause analysis, we're going to implement controls, and we're going to review them. We take the same Makigami we already made. So it's still on the wall. We have a piece of paper, we have the sticky notes, all the details are there. And then we're going to do a what-if analysis. So a what-if analysis is similar to brainstorming about improvements, but now we're going to look at our concerns. What type of issues do we expect in the future? What could happen? And this is a brainstorm technique, but it's not just open brainstorming and we hope something comes out of it. We're going to give them some questions to use. We're going to use the 6 M's. And this is again a basic Kaizen tool, quite often used for identifying areas for improvement. It stands for machine, method, man or mind power, materials, mother nature, and measurements. These are things that can impact our process. And if you combine these 6 M's with undesired events, you can identify the risks in your process. So what if this machine creates an error or goes into failure? What if this raw material is delayed? What if the end product is not shipped? Undesired events combined with the 6 M's. The answers are the risks in your supply chain. Not all evenly important, but these are the risks in your supply chain. How does it look? Quite simple. And hopefully you will have less risks than issues, because that makes the improvement easier. We list all the issues and wastes in an overview, and we do the same with the risks / undesired events. And then we're going to have a look at these. We're going to prioritize them. How often does it happen, or can it happen? And if it happens, what is the impact of it? And based on that calculation, we can actually set an improvement priority number. And the ones with the highest numbers, those are the ones we're going to solve or prevent. So far we didn't make any improvements. We didn't make any changes. We looked at the issues, we identified the improvements, and we looked at risks, and we figured out which risks and which improvements should we make. We actually did not make any improvements. That's the next step. We call it robust process design. Because if you know all your improvement areas and you know all your risks, now it's time to take this information into account when looking at your requirements for the process. The goal of process design is to create an efficient, effective, but also a consistent process. Anytime the process runs, you want to have the same output. It's just like a production line. You don't want to have any variance at the end. You need to know what quality comes out of the production line. It's the same with a supply chain. It needs to be predictable. Whatever the situation is, you want to be able to predict the output of the supply chain. So we can, if we have to put it in a statement, a process is robust if it performs efficient, effective and predictable, regardless the conditions. So that's the goal of process design. So we take the list. We take away some of the duplicates because some risks might already have happened in the past and are one of your issues. So we take away the duplicates, and what remains we prioritize based on the impact and the frequency. And then we take a look at the Makigami again. Remember, it's still on the wall. All the sticky notes are there, all the information is there. And we're going to add something to it. At the bottom, we're going to add our requirements. And we're going to have a look at the requirements for IT, from IT perspective, from finance, HR, legal department. Any department that might be relevant for this process, we're going to involve to find the right requirements. And then we write them down, because those requirements will be our action plan in the future. Those requirements will tell us what we need to change and how we need to change it. Those requirements is not all. At the bottom you can see the pink sticky notes. We capture also the tools and templates we need. That's quite basic, but we also capture the KPIs, the measurements we want to take in the process. Because if you're going to redesign a process, then you may have to make sure you don't forget about the measurements in the process. Because the data you will collect by running your processes will be very helpful, not only maintaining the processes, but also to predict future events based on the trends you can see in data. So we also capture the measurements, the way the process processes things, and the quality of the output. Based on that, we know what we need to do. So we have the action items, we know what to create. So we just set up a project. We document the processes, the to-be processes, the roles and responsibilities, all the measurements, including the definitions, the calculations, but also the actions we should take if a measurement come above or below a certain threshold. And we document all requirements. Then we launch a project. Of course, with nice planning, we start executing and we set up project governance to make sure our projects end on time, in full. Some of our project teams. You can see the Makigamis in the background, the sticky notes, and the project teams. And maybe you're wondering right now, alright, but we live in COVID-19 world. Those people are quite close to each other. That's not 1.5 meters. How are we going to do this in the future? Because we can't get that close to people. And it was a challenge, also for us, because we believe in the group exercise. We believe in bringing people together, combining their knowledge, their information, so that everybody gets the same understanding in the process. And that actually delivers us the best results. So how are we going to do it in the future? And we found a solution, because the whole world is going remote. We have to work remote. So I will launch our remote solution. We have a remote tool in which we can cover all the steps in the process. So we can start the project by documenting what we're trying to achieve, what we need to deliver for this project, what not, what should be out of scope. We capture some basic information about the project. Then we actually move to the SciPoc, which we can make online because it is a remote tool. That means if you are located in Tokyo or New York and you log into this tool, you can see real time what I'm typing. If I drag and drop one of the sticky notes, you will be able to see it. So we can actually work on it at the same moment, on the same time. You can even make comments, leave notes, create your own sticky notes. So it's fully interactive and it's quite close to the real group exercise. Once the SciPoc is done, we can actually start making a Makigami. We cover all the details. We can add documents to it. We can add the issues to it and the risks. And in the end, when we have our solutions, that's how we found an improvement, we move them to our PDCA boards. And one by one, we will start implementing the requirements. So we plan the requirements, we implement them, and we check if they function as desired, functioned as designed. And this is all remote. And this has some benefits for us, because if you look at the current world, then just before COVID-19 hit us, sustainability was a hot topic, and that will be a hot topic in the future as well. So these workshops, which we used to do face-to-face, we now can actually do remote. It saves us a lot of travel time, but also the impact on the environment, impact on costs, and it has the same outcome. Because we still can combine the knowledge of people into one room, a remote room, a channel. So this is our solution to these type of workshops. So if you look at our approach to Kaizen, it goes beyond the basics. We don't stick with the basic approach which was designed by Toyota. It is important, it's at the core of our Kaizen approach, but we think we need more. We need to look at processes, we need to look at data, we need to look at risks. So if you look at our Kaizen services, we have the process improvement part. We can do quick scans. It doesn't always have to be that detailed. But if it needs to be detailed, we perform a full process analysis. But we can also run full Kaizen projects where we combine everything we have. We look at the processes, we look at the data, we look at the risks. We look at the process design. We're consultants. We're not a consultancy firm, but we like to work together with our customers. So we can help setting up your own Kaizen approach for your company. We can train you certain things. We can have some brainstorm sessions. We can help you with the governance or the infrastructure. How do you make sure your whole company actually lives Kaizen? It's not about only running some project. It is about involving all layers of your organization and making sure everybody is aware of what you're trying to do. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. Our Kaizen approach, we see it as a systemic approach because it's always the same. It's a standard we follow. We have standard steps. And by having standard steps in our Kaizen approach, it leads to certain benefits. High reliability, predictability, productivity and efficiency, which I think will become very important after Corona as well, after COVID-19, because cost savings need to be there. I don't like only to focus on cost savings, but they will be important in the future. Increase robustness, business agility, that one will be very important. We need to be able to respond before disruptions happen. It's time for some questions and answers. I know I give you an overload of information, so I hope there are a lot of questions you want to discuss with me. I will give you a few minutes to type them in, the questions and answers, the Q&A feature at the bottom of Zoom. If you don't want to leave a question, but you still want to talk in detail about our Kaizen approach, more than happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. You can drop me an email, or Mailu, you can send her an email as well. Or just go to kaizenwebinars.com. You can leave your details. I'm more than happy to discuss how we apply Kaizen. Let's do the Q&A, so please give me some of your questions. I'm more than happy to answer them. opening the Q&A. So far I don't see any questions yet, but do not hesitate if you have any questions. I'm here to answer them. I ordered dinner, so I can stay here for a couple of hours if needed. So. I see a question coming in the chat. That's no problem. I will answer that one as well. So the question is, your Kaizen approach is more than basic. What is the difference from Scrum or Agile methods? Actually, there is an overlap with Scrum or Agile, especially if you look at our PDCA board at the end when we have items to implement. That's quite close to Agile Scrum. But I think the main difference is that we like to start with a picture of the end state in mind, where Scrum and Agile is a more flexible approach to that part. Because the requirements can change on a weekly or bi-weekly basis if you follow an Agile approach. Well, we more or less want to have a fixed idea of the supply chain in the future. But there is an overlap, so the flexibility is there, but in our mindset we want to have a fixed idea first. I hope I answered your question on that one. I see a next question. Do you see Kaizen philosophy being applied widely in non-Japanese companies? We're going to answer that one as well. Yes, I do see the Kaizen philosophy in a lot of non-Japanese companies, but they just call it different. It's called TPM, TPS, Lean. But in the end, the philosophy is almost the same. The toolboxes are also highly the same. So everybody wants to make changes for the better, regardless the toolbox. The only difference I see, if you look at Kaizen and Lean, for example, which have both the same goal, is actually that Kaizen is more about people. It's about involving all layers of your organization. Workers, the people who actually do the job, who actually sit behind a laptop doing the work, who actually pick and pack the boxes in the warehouse, or actually work at the production line. Those people have the most knowledge, and that's where we tap into. So every project for us starts with determining the actors in the process. You remember the sidewalk. It is about the suppliers and the customers, and we bring those together. That's the basic of our Kaizen approach. Where Lean most of the time is more related to the tools. So the end goal is the same, but how to get there might be a difference. Next question is actually about having a practical example how we improve supply chains approach. And yes, of course we can. We have almost too many examples to pick one. But for a high-tech medical company here in the Benelux, which used to have their warehouses in Germany, we had a look at their supply chain. We looked at all their flows, where they came from in detail, the volumes, the frequencies, and based on that information, we selected a different location for their warehousing. First step, we look at your complete supply chain, and based on the gravity of your supply chain, we choose the best location. But it didn't stop there, because for that customer we did land transport, some ocean freight, and the warehousing part. We did just move a warehouse, because when you move a warehouse, that's the ideal situation to actually do a full redesign of the processes as well. So we had a look at their existing processes, and while we were setting up the warehouse, we actually made a complete redesign. We put in some more innovative solutions, conveyors, some automation, and especially in their packing area, we were able to reduce, and that one is on cost savings, the headcounts with quite a big number, by going from fully manual to semi-manual, semi-automated. So we looked at the bigger piece, the end-to-end supply chain. So what is your best location if you look at the gravity of your processes, of your supply chain? And then we start looking into detail in pieces of that supply chain. All right, if we look at the warehousing part, what can we do? If we look at your land transport, what type of trucking companies are you using? How do you connect with those companies? How do you set out the different volumes? How do you share those items? All those things are being investigated. So we start with the end-to-end supply chain, and then we start zooming in, taking pieces of the supply chain and improving them as well. One other question is about, do you see significant changes in the future in the logistics flows and sector? Ooh, that's not, indeed, that's a more general question, but it is a good one. It's something we have been looking into just recently as well. We are looking at the world after COVID-19 and what impact that should have, or probably will have. One of the things we see is the trend of deglobalization. If you take the healthcare industry, for example, then a lot of the raw materials are being shipped from China, Asia, India towards Europe, which had quite some issues at the early start of the corona crisis. We expect that there will be more deglobalization and that those suppliers will move more into the eastern part of Europe, and that creates a different flow, because then you would move from ocean or air freight actually to land transport or maybe rail freight. So yes, we do see some changes on that side. Let me scroll through the chat again. Ooh, any thoughts on the longer impact on supply chains once a sense of normality takes place? Well, I think that one relates to the fact of for example, deglobalization. I expect a huge impact on rail freight, for example. If you look at the current railways from China to Eastern Europe, that will be growing as well. Rail freight from Eastern Europe into Western Europe, that will happen. I think those items will be part of our new normal in the future. One other question: what tools do you recommend to manage the SIPOC and Makigami dashboards? I've seen that you're using Microsoft Whiteboard. That's correct. I know other generic tools like Trello, but there are specific tools. Thanks. Yes, I know Trello as well. Actually, I have used it in the past quite often. I like the tool, especially for project management. It's a very good tool to make lists, like a PDCA list with things to plan, to do, etc. If you work with an agile approach, that one works really, really well. But it isn't that well designed for making a Makigami, because you need more flexibility. You need to be able to stick that sticky note wherever you want, and that's not possible with Trello. We like Microsoft Whiteboard because it's integrated in Microsoft Teams, which is our communication or a remote communication tool. And I know there are some more tools. Actually, I actually tested, but in the end we choose for Microsoft Whiteboard, being more flexible and being integrated with Microsoft Office 365. So I don't know any other tools you could use for that. Sorry. I think I covered all the questions. Yes, there are no outstanding questions anymore. Maybe this is if there are no other questions, then maybe this is a good moment to go back to Jorge.
Okay, Kieran, thank you very much for your nice presentation on Kaizen and how Kaizen is applied and implemented by you at USEN Logistics. So thank you very much again. It was a pleasure to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you to you and to USEN for this nice webinar that you gave to us. Y a todos vosotros, a todos ustedes, muchísimas gracias por su presencia hoy con nosotros y les emplazo al próximo jueves a la misma hora, donde vamos a tener otro coloquio online sobre el interesante tema que va a ser la importancia del compliance en los tiempos de crisis. Luego a todos, muchas gracias, cuídense y hasta la semana que viene. Buenas tardes.